June 10th, 2026, NBA Finals, Game 4. The San Antonio Spurs, after avoiding a fatal 3-0 hole throughout Game 3, have seemingly figured out the New York Knicks after one of the most dominant first halves in finals history.
Wembanyama was pointing to his head, kind of saying, "I'm in your head."
Placing themselves up by 29 points, now just 22 minutes away from heading back home to potentially be a single win away from hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy. However, it was ultimately this, the last in a series of mistakes.
That quickness just gets Towns shaken up.
After review, it's been deemed the elbow of Wembanyama makes unnecessary contact to the chin of Towns. This rises to the level of a flagrant foul, penalty 1.
Which would change NBA Finals history forever.
Crowd has come alive. And Brunson red hot here in the third quarter. It's a 12-point game, and it's a 7-point game. Bang! 4-point game. Pumps it in. 1-point game. Blocked by Anunoby. Brunson gets it. Fires up a three. Shot no good. What the hell did we just see?
But how did we even get here? Why did an accidental elbow change the course of history? And how did these two teams get all the way to the finals anyway? Well, to find that out, let's dive straight into the end of the 2024-2025 season. May 31st, 2025.
How confident are you that this group has enough to take that next step? And
the most confidence, overconfident. Seriously, there's not an ounce of any type of doubt that I'm not confident with this group.
After being eliminated just short of their first finals berth since 1999, Jalen Brunson, the former Dallas Mavericks 33rd pick and current face of the New York Knicks franchise, remains hopeful heading into the 2025-2026 season. Meanwhile, Victor Wembanyama, the 2023 San Antonio Spurs #1 pick, after an up and down season which saw the French 7'5" alien ruled out for most of it due to a blood clot, also headed into this fresh season full of confidence.
This is my best summer so far. Like I can tell the progress is just incredible. I feel better, I look stronger, and the scale says I'm heavier, so everything is a green light. I'm hungry and I will be ready.
Combine their stars' self-belief with the fact that the Spurs, due to missing Wemby for most of their 2024-25 season, managed to land the second pick of the 2025 draft and used it on the son of 5-time NBA champion Ron Harper. Dylan, the Texas franchise, seemed poised to make their first postseason run since 2019. However, most analysts didn't actually believe in either of these squads.
And then the Celtics. Oh boy, this is what Jason Tatum wanted. He got injured in Madison Square Garden. I think it's a 7-game series with Jason Tatum winning at home and advancing to play Cleveland.
So I have the Nuggets coming on top in the West this season.
So would they be right in their early predictions, or would those they doubted prove them all wrong? December 13th, 2025, NBA Cup Western Conference Semifinals. The San Antonio Spurs, now with head coach Mitch Johnson fully employed as their leader, alongside a somewhat healthy Wembanyama, who began this game off the bench, are set to face who they were going to have to defeat in order to get into both the NBA and Cup Finals. The defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder.
Pass is in the building. First lead of the ball game for San Antonio.
Wemby is at the high elbow.
Here's this matchup. Wembanyama. Watched by Caruso. Wembanyama. Got it back. Fires. And it drops. The Spurs are NBA Cup giant killers.
An incredible battle in which the Spurs' balanced attack had incredibly seen them hand the Thunder just their second loss of that season.
Some people are built for these moments, some aren't, but we definitely are, and it shows because it's not against anybody that we won that game. So it's just, again, I feel lucky. I'm glad we have this group because everybody buys into this and everybody is built for these moments.
However, their opponent for the Cup final, the New York Knicks, also had something to prove.
Oh, Brunson with a highlight.
Because even with Victor continuing to be seemingly unstoppable,
Wembanyama again. Yes, sir!
Brunson, who had earned the nickname Captain Clutch, wasn't going to let his squad head back to Manhattan empty-handed.
Barely 6-foot guard, not physically impressive, not athletic, but he's able to manipulate, defense. Obviously, big head, so he has a big brain. Inch for inch, I think he's probably the best one.
What do you mean by that?
The New York Knicks are NBA Cup champions.
Can I say something before I answer your question?
Of course.
OG Anunoby, Tyler Kolek, Jordan Clarkson, Mitchell Robinson, they play their ass off tonight. Now, without them, we don't win this. We don't win this.
Yet, the Knicks, despite their victory, decided to do something no other team had done with their midseason title, because both the Milwaukee Bucks and the 17-time title-winning franchise, the Los Angeles Lakers, who had won the previous cups, had hung banners in recognition of their achievement. However, New York opted not to, but why?
Yes, no, we are going to raise a banner.
No, you're not.
We're going to raise the NBA championship banner. That's the banner we want to raise.
So, having a clear goal in their sights, the New York Knicks just continued to mesh and gel as a squad, doing their best to set themselves up with a higher seed in the Eastern Conference as they look to go 6 games further this postseason. Meanwhile, in the Western Conference, the San Antonio Spurs are seemingly years ahead of schedule, because even with a third-year player in Vic as their centerpiece and their backcourt being comprised of a sophomore, Stephon Castle, a rookie, Dylan Harper, and De'Aaron Fox, were unstoppable, shockingly dominating the Thunder 4-1 throughout the regular season and finishing just behind their Oklahoma rivals as the 2nd seed in the Western Conference, setting themselves up for a round 1 matchup against the surging Portland Trailblazers. Yet, back in the East, the Knicks were facing serious doubt as they headed into their own first-round battle with the 6th-seeded Atlanta Hawks.
Well, Hawks in 7, man.
I'm not really, giving you this with a bunch of confidence. I'm concerned about the Knicks. I wouldn't be shocked if the Hawks win this game.
And the belief in the young Spurs wasn't great either.
I do think ultimately, if it came down to Jokic, Wemby, tie goes to the champion, tie goes to experience, and Jokic in a Game 7 almost took care of the Thunder last year. I think he'd be able to get the job done.
But it wasn't the doubt that was the most painful thing for the New York Knicks. No. Game 3.
This was the Knicks' opportunity. And if you gonna go down, damn, go down late in the 2nd round against Boston. Go down in the conference finals against Detroit or somebody. The first round to the Atlanta Hawks, to CJ McCollum.
I'm like, what do you say me for?
New York, a squad who had bet everything on building this roster, trading 5 first-round picks for wing Mikal Bridges, sending their versatile guard and forward Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle to the Wolves in exchange for their current big man Karl Anthony Towns, and the fact that Brunson had taken a massive pay cut to even allow his Knicks to do all of this, were now down 2-1 in this first-round series, 2 losses away from being straight up eliminated. So, how would the Knicks respond? April 21st, 2026.
Moving on, Holiday, try to pull the chair, get out of the way. Wembanyama to the deck.
Victor Wembanyama, who had scored 35 points in his playoff debut and had been presented with his Defensive Player of the Year trophy pre-game here tonight, has just been ruled out for not only this battle with a concussion, but potentially the remainder of this series. A devastating fact that allowed their rivals to mount an epic 27-10 run to round out Game 2 and tie the series at 1 apiece. So, with Vic potentially out in concussion protocols, could the young Spurs actually get it done without him? Or would the rising Blazers burn down San Antonio's title hopes? Game 4.
Johnson and Anunoby. OG stepping back, feeling it. Give another one. Brunson dancing with Bogues. Makes it 2. Trail triple.
Desperate and driven to take that huge next step this season, the New York Knicks, many of whom played together on Villanova's 2016 and 2018 national championship winning squads back in college, have just ripped the Atlanta Hawks to shreds, which didn't only see them winning tonight, but starting one of the most insane series of events in NBA history.
This magic carpet ride continues. Straight victories.
And guess what? It wasn't just the Knicks who came out and showed how destructive their roster truly could be, because thanks to 33 points from Stephon Castle and 27 from their rookie Harper in Game 3, welcomed their French big man back for Game 4 with a 2-1 series lead, an advantage that Wembanyama simply helped them to extend, seeing the Spurs winning their first round playoff series as a group and advancing into round 2 for a matchup against the franchise who had been to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, the Anthony Edwards-led Minnesota Timberwolves. Only it wasn't just San Antonio advancing into the top 8, because New York, thanks to an insane 39-point Jalen Brunson night in Game 5 and their forward OG Anunoby's 29 in Game 6, combined with Karl Anthony Towns' incredible playmaking, saw the Knicks entering their own second round battle with the surging Philadelphia 76ers on a 3-game winning streak. But yet again, New York just ran into more doubt.
The series, I think the Knicks are a slight favorite. I think it's a coin flip. If you told me Embiid and Paul George were healthy, I'd probably take Philadelphia narrowly.
Because Philadelphia, after going down 3-1 against the 2024 NBA champion Boston Celtics in round 1, mounted their own 3-game winning streak behind Joel Embiid's shocking performances, making it appear as if the Sixers truly were the better franchise. Or were they? May 10th, 2026.
Game 4 to the Timberwolves.
The Minnesota Timberwolves, thanks to a 36-point night from their own superstar, Anthony Edwards,
I want to kill everything in front of me, so
have just tied the series at 2 games apiece, leaving many to wonder, would the second round truly be as far as San Antonio would get this season?
Aren't we still asking the question? Do you really trust San Antonio? It's 101, 4 minutes left. I mean, do we trust them yet? We know we will eventually trust them. We trust OKC. I don't know if I trust them.
Well, despite many highlighting the complete lack of experience up and down the Spurs roster, those who had never even been to the playoffs before held a completely different outlook regarding that fact.
The lack of experience is a strength. We can do impossible stuff because we don't know it's impossible.
Because despite literally being in the lottery last year, thanks to a shocking
Wembanyama from the outside, ball in his hands a lot. Still Game 3, as Wembanyama has the ball a lot and is doing a lot. Castle right back to him, feeling it. Wembanyama, an unbelievable start here tonight.
18-point first quarter from their alien and 21 points off the bench from Keldon Johnson. It was now the Texas franchise who was just a single game away from the conference finals. But could they really close things out on the road in Game 6? Or would the Hungry Wolves force a win or go home Game 7? Meanwhile, out east, the New York Knicks, led by their stars' insane night.
Once again, right at him. He'll pull up and hit.
35 points on 63% from the field, had not only shocked the Philadelphia 76ers in just Game 1, but went on to amazingly.
I think they're coming together at the right time. This is just a team that we thought was great, had expectations for, and they're showing it. You know, they're finally focused, intense, and locked in, and being together.
Sweep the 76ers right out of the postseason.
If they continue to play like this, the sky is the limit.
So would the Spurs be joining them in their respective conference finals? Game 6.
Oh, Castle in the sky. Castle, they're not there, and Castle takes advantage, a chance at a three-point play. Give it up. Castle's at the hot hand and connects for 3.
Stephon Castle, the Spurs' 4th pick in the 2024 draft, who, much like Brunson, had also won a collegiate championship, was truly dominating, pouring in 32 points on 69% from the field as the Spurs closed out the Wolves 8 minutes before the final buzzer had even rung out. A truly incredible feat which began to raise a very serious question. Could this young San Antonio Spurs squad actually be the team to dethrone the defending champions?
Does experience matter? At this point, it absolutely does, because you're playing now, you have the matchup that you wanted, you're playing a defending champion, and you're playing a group of guys that's already been there. This is a team poised, and they're highly confident.
Or would the Thunder, having already been all the way and hoisted the Larry O'Brien trophy above their heads, return yet again to the NBA Finals?
If we don't know that it's impossible, we will do it. As simple as that.
May 19th, 2026. Despite the Knicks entering the conference finals as the favored franchise against rivals, the Cleveland Cavaliers, New York have found themselves in an apparently inescapable hole, down by 22 points with just 6 minutes remaining. But the Knicks, who are currently on a 7-game winning streak, had no interest in that being snapped.
Knicks, they're within range. It only takes a couple of shots to put that pressure back on the Cavaliers.
Brunson drives on Wade, scoop layup, it's good. Beautiful. Fakes, drive, gets inside, pull-up jumper, got it. Brunson, three-pointer, puts it in. Brunson with Harden on him. Brunson on the drive, the floater, bank shot, it's good.
Rallying to record a truly shocking 32-18 fourth quarter run, and thanks to Sam Merrill's game winner somehow rattling out, New York's domination simply pressed on into overtime, in which the Knicks ripped the Cavs to shreds 14-3 and stole the game 1 victory. Yet, despite what they had just shown, doubt that New York could actually return to the finals for the first time in 27 years still remained.
But it doesn't matter. Cavs in 6.
LeBron James.
Oh, the serious skepticism that you can beat truly great teams to a title being that reliant on one player to generate that much of your offense.
Disbelief that San Antonio was also running into.
Down 15 to start. The Thunder win by 15 and take a 2-1 series lead.
I'm picking OKC, but I'm definitely cheering for the Spurs.
Which, coupled with the fact that the Spurs required a record-shattering Game 1 performance from Wembanyama,
he becomes the youngest player in playoff history with a 40-20 game
in order to grab their lone victory of the series, saw those who thought San Antonio's youth would be too much to overcome doubling down on those thoughts.
I believe OKC still wins it. I'm putting my money on the reigning champs, but I would not be surprised if this series goes 7.
So, was the Western Conference Finals the last stop on the Spurs' 2026 playoff run?
I have trouble making my teammates better right now. That's what I should do better. My shooting splits aren't terrible. I need to be more of a team player.
Or could San Antonio turn things around and grab the 3 further victories they required in order to advance onto the ultimate stage of basketball?
Analytically, I think we've won the I said 3 out of 3. We're 2 out of 3 in the expected. I don't know if you guys follow that as an expected score. You know, and we won 2 out of the 3.
Back in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks have been destroying the deflated Cavaliers.
This team is a very selfless group. At the end of the day, we know we're willing to sacrifice our own individual performance, our stats, our accolades for the betterment of the team. And when you have not just 1, 2, or 3, but a whole team of those kind of guys and that kind of character, it puts you in a position to be successful.
Resulting in New York not only just winning games 2 and 3, but after nearly 3 decades, finally returning to the championship round as they began their final ascent to grab the trophy, which had eluded their franchise for 53 years.
Those teams out west are really good. I love my Spurs, but the way they're playing right now, I think they could be champions this year.
So, who would they be facing in the NBA Finals anyway? Game 4.
Because we have seen Wemby when he comes out with something to prove. He has a different level of offensive production.
Wembanyama, I think he's going to go. I think he's going to go from midcourt. Got it!
With Victor Wembanyama, who had witnessed his rival Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being presented with his back-to-back MVP trophy, an award that Wemby himself felt he should have won, was fueled with motivation, coming out and scoring 22 points in the first half alone, which was followed up by a dominant defensive second half in which the Spurs held the Thunder to just 30% from the field, resulting in this series being tied at 2 games apiece. But heading back to OKC for Game 5, could the Spurs really grab that pivotal victory? Or would it be the Thunder who would exit just a single W away from returning to the finals? Game 5.
I'm not worried in the least bit.
Okay, good. Thank goodness.
I'm terrified!
LeBron James.
The Oklahoma City Thunder, after an impressive 69-point first half, which was backed up by their finals MVP totaling 32 points, plus the fact that Wemby had faltered.
4 for 15, Nick?
I know, bro.
0 for 5 from 3?
Wasn't good.
6 measly rebounds in a pivotal Game 5?
Yeah, I hated it.
And am I concerned? Am I worried? Yeah, I'm worried, Wild stuff.
Saw many believing that this series was straight up over.
It wasn't age that I thought Wemby had to overcome. He's doing this for the first time. The playoffs are different. You don't go from lottery to the finals, and they're not going to go from lottery to the finals. It's not going to happen. It's fine. That despair will drive him. He'll go see some more monks in the offseason. He'll do what Wemby does. He'll come back angrier. We've seen this forever. You come back because you have been worn down over 6 or 7 games. That's what's happening to Wemby.
I have felt like the inexperience and youth of Wemby and the Spurs could cost them a trip to the final.
Game 6.
Last game. Wembanyama calls for that right away. He's playing a quarter. Harper lines it up. Knocks it down. Of course, they were invited back for 6. Wembanyama.
San Antonio, stealing a page from the Thunder's book, mounted their own incredible first half performance, in which not only Wemby dominated, but their rookie guard, Dylan Harper, also provided valuable buckets.
The work I put in on the court, off the court, kind of makes me build for moments like this. And today, my little sister called me before the game and was like, you got to make it to Saturday. I was like, all right, got you. I'm a man of my word, so.
To make things even better for the Spurs, with the Thunder conceding defeat as the final quarter began, a 7th and final game was set. The only question that remained was, which team would emerge from it? Game 7.
With a double overtime thriller, Gilgeous Alexander wants to have that party again next fall. Extend the lead or cut into this lead. SGA.
Shea, who would drop 13 points in the second quarter alone, and follow this up by adding in 12 throughout the third, and eventually totaling 35 as the final buzzer rang out.
I wanted to make sure that I gave it my all, and I was who I was today.
Had done his best to ensure that his team would be receiving the opportunity to become the first back-to-back champion since the 2018 Golden State Warriors. But was his performance even enough?
They don't give a damn about the word experience.
Moves to the basket. Open waiting. Wembanyama throws it on his head. Wemby pulling from 3. Got it.
It's the monks. We gotta send our kids to the monks.
Because thanks to not only Victor Wembanyama, but the whole of the San Antonio Spurs contributing, and their backup big, Luke Cornett, recording this insane block.
As someone from the bench yelled, who that is, LeBron James?
It was ultimately the San Antonio Spurs franchise returning to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2014. So, now that the ultimate round matchup had been set, who would emerge as champions? The well ahead of schedule San Antonio Spurs or the rising New York Knicks?
Is it Wemby's league now?
We are officially in the Victor Wembanyama era of the NBA, and it is ahead of schedule. Because we thought it would come in a year or 2, but this is the difference. There was one word that Dylan Harper said that just spoke to me of legends and greatness: relentless. And it's not about just what you do on the box score, what you do on the X's and O's. Said that the greats have this ability to be present. Victor Wembanyama doesn't have to be playing perfectly. As long as he's present, competing, he has that special factor where everyone believes they can win.
When I watched the Spurs finish off that game in Oklahoma City in the fourth quarter with guys who'd never been in a Game 7 before, hitting shots under pressure, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I don't care about experience anymore. This team can do anything.
I'm leaning Spurs too because the quality of depth on this team. And remember, Cleveland was up, 22 points in game one because New York had a little bit of a longer break. If the Spurs are up 22 points with 8 minutes to go, game over.
Because real doubt that the Knicks bigs Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson could even contain Wembanyama existed.
Because if I was the Knicks, my take on this whole series would be, we are going to be super physical with the Spurs. They're young, or thick, or big, or physical.
However, the Knicks, who had been preparing for this moment all season long, were focused on one thing and one thing only: the Larry O'Brien Trophy. However, not even 12 minutes into Game 1, New York would receive some devastating news. Because due to a collision between Spurs forward Harrison Barnes and Jalen Brunson sending the Knicks superstar to the locker room, San Antonio would rocket ahead to a 14-point lead early.
This is not the Cavs, this is not the Sixers. Like, they have to understand they're going to get hit with a blow right away.
Yet, with the eventual re-emergence of Jalen Brunson, the Knicks, who had been in far worse holes not only in these playoffs, but also in last year's Eastern Conference Finals run, remained focused on each possession in front of them.
For our guys just to stay with it is huge, because anything can happen in a 48-minute game as long as you stay the course.
Whilst also answering the #1 question heading into this series.
I'm going to figure it out. Yeah, I mean, I was bad tonight. It's not more complicated than that.
By holding Vic to just 28% from the field, which, combined with some captain clutch heroics.
Back to Brunson. Corner three is up. Bang! Brunson on the drive, spins. Underneath, puts it up, puts it in!
Saw the Knicks extending their win streak to 12 and grabbing the 1-0 lead, but the series was far from over.
We're going to have many more chances. It's a 1-4 series, so.
Game 2, New York, for once, actually managed to get out to a double-digit lead with just 6 minutes remaining in the final quarter. And given their relative experience compared to the Spurs, it seemed like the Knicks would hold on and grab the unthinkable 2-0 series lead on the road. Only the Spurs, knowing that going down 0-2 at home would place them in a hole no other team in NBA history had ever dug themselves out of, fought back viciously.
Vassell, three-pointer. It's good! 2-point game! Wemby inside, layup is good! And the foul!
But the Knicks, even though they had blown their lead, still had at least 2 more possessions to correct their mistakes. However, with their failure to put themselves up in the following play, they had apparently given San Antonio the final possession.
Stolen by Brunson and knocked down by Wemby.
Yet again, even after gifting the Knicks the ball back and the lead, it was still San Antonio with the final chance that they headed into Madison Square Garden with the series tied at 1 apiece.
So Wembanyama pulls up, jumper, won't go, rebound taken by Vassell, it's over.
I threw that one away. I messed up. We didn't play great as a team. We needed to win that game. This game was ours. But at this point, it's done. It's, yes, am I going to regret it? Yes, of course. Am I going to use that to fuel me and to fuel us next game? Absolutely.
So now tasked with the impossible, heading into MSG down 2-0 and desperately needing a win in their following battle, could the Spurs really get it done? Game 3.
I mean, I don't think our confidence ever wavered, in those moments, but going down 0-2 isn't really ideal, especially knowing you're going on the road next, but I think with the group that we have and what we've shown all year, I don't got nothing but confidence in them.
What's that saying? Don't let us get one?
Yeah, don't let us get one.
Knowing full well that literally no team in NBA history, regardless of what round it was, had ever come back from being down 3-0, the Spurs played their hearts out throughout this must-win game.
I thought we showed better poise at times, and I just thought we were in attack mode, but also as a collective group.
But even with a shocking 32-point night from Wembanyama, 23 from Stefan, and 12 from Dylan Harper failed to score here, and New York might just leave the Garden a single win away from their first title in 53 years.
Fox gets into the paint, puts up jumper, got it!
So, Thanks to Fox's clutch jumper and Stefan's series-saving free throws, San Antonio had finally managed to record a victory, and what was about to happen in their following battle made it seem as if the Spurs were far from being done in this series. Game 4.
His handle for his size is just hard to believe. Spins, falling away, flips it up and bangs it home. An amazing play from Wembanyama, and it's a 17-point lead. Spurs have 37 points. Wembanyama was pointing to his head, kind of saying, I'm in your head.
Driven and desperate, knowing that only a single team had ever come back from being down 3-1 in the NBA Finals. Out of the 37 times it had happened, Victor Wembanyama, alongside his young Spurs teammates, came out in Game 4 and showed just how mature they seemingly were.
It's amazing how quiet the crowd is right now.
Rocketing out to a 29-point lead, comfortably ahead of the record-setting 24-point comeback that the Boston Celtics mounted back in the 2008 Finals. However, with Wemby elbowing Karl Anthony Towns and finally being assessed the flagrant foul Knicks fans felt he should have gotten in Game 3 when he shoved Jalen Brunson, Vic had given New York fans and the franchise they loved so dearly the one thing they so desperately needed: hope. The screaming pleas of Knicks fans, initially in outrage and eventually in ecstasy at the assessment of the flagrant to Wemby, began to see them rise out of their seats and ignite the flame to what would start one of the most insane series of events in NBA history.
So we just keep fighting. We know at the end of the day, the game's not over at halftime, and you just want to continue to chip. You don't look at, when you're down 29, we got to win this game. Okay, let's get it to 20.
Experience teaches you a lot, and I think experience today let us know that we cannot let go of the rope. If we go out there and take it to another level, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you make your luck. We made our luck today.
Hart tries a three. Hart hits a three. Suddenly it's cut to 16. Towns off the bounce, step back, puts up the three. It's good. Karl Anthony Towns nailed it. It's a 12-point game.
The defensive player of the year in this series, 101, has been getting exposed. The defensive player of the year last night in the second half got disrespected.
Corner three, Anunoby. Bang! 4-point game. Brunson fires up a three. Puts it in! 1-point game!
However, despite the Knicks being just 30 seconds away from completing an apparently impossible comeback, with forward Josh Hart crucially missing a box out, which allowed Stephon Castle to not only grab an offensive rebound, but place his squad up by a single point, all of that hope seemed lost. An anxiety within the arena, which was only made worse due to Captain Clutch failing to put his squad ahead and De'Aaron Fox, one of the league's quickest players, leaking out for what might just be the game-winning layup.
Fox has it inside, blocked by Anunoby.
But even with OG preventing his rival from scoring, one fact remained: the New York Knicks were still down 1, and the desperate franchise had just 5.7 seconds left to correct this.
Brunson gets it, fires up a three. Shot no good, the chip, it's gone! It's gone! It's gone! With 1.2 remaining! Harper lobs it inside. Castle hasn't lost it. That's it, it's over!
You just hit the game-winning shot in an NBA Finals game in front of your home crowd. How does that feel?
It feels cool. I mean, everyone's pretty excited. I'm excited too.
A truly mind-boggling event that broke the spirits of the San Antonio Spurs.
What's going through my mind right now, I think it's going to go one of two ways. The bad one would be giving up. The good one would be getting stronger through this, getting more together. And I know this is what we're going to do.
Game 5. Even though this game was played in Texas and San Antonio had attempted to place geo-blockers on ticket sales, this crucial battle seemed more like a Knicks home game than a Spurs one.
And nails the three.
To make matters worse for San Antonio, the simple fact that games 1, 2, and 4 had been well within their reach, but ultimately slipped away due to mistakes, seeing the belief within the arena being slowly withered away with each Jalen Brunson bucket. Because a simple fact that had been obvious all playoffs long remain.
Yeah, everybody's better than Jalen Brunson until it's time to be better than Jalen Brunson.
As thanks to Jalen, the Dallas Mavericks 2018 33rd pick, who some believed could never be the guy on a championship-winning franchise.
Jalen Brunson.
No, he's too small.
But here's the thing, and that's
Didn't they say about you?
But you know
they
what?
say that about you.
But
You're a Hall of
you know
Famer.
what?
I got a philosophy.
But-
Can I say my philosophy?
Go ahead.
If your best player is small, you're not winning.
Answering every single question the Spurs posed to him.
But our errors, our mistakes are punished so hard.
By destroying the Spurs defense for a series high 45 points. It was incredibly the New York Knicks being crowned as NBA champions for the first time since 1973.
The 2026 NBA Finals MVP is the captain, Jalen Brunson.
Yet one very scary fact remains. Victor Wembanyama, in just his third year in the league, had made it all the way to the NBA Finals. And despite the mistakes the Spurs had made, which allowed New York to steal victories in games 1, 2, and 4, these experiences are only going to serve as fuel for San Antonio.
One of many things I learned is the margin of error is very, very thin. Our domination stints are absolute. We absolutely dominated for most of the series. We can't have ups and downs like this so much, you know. The ups are okay, the downs, it's the reason we lost. It's painful, you know, it's painful. But I'm not running away from that. I'm using that to fuel me. I'm sure all these guys you named, they're not satisfied with being eliminated in earlier rounds or not making the playoffs. And I'm not satisfied with not winning. But as I said, this is the biggest lesson of my life. As a team, there's no better experience than what we just lived.
Speaking of Wemby, outside of the freshly gained experience of this deep 2026 playoff run, why is the whole NBA actually terrified of what's to come with Victor Wembanyama? And why are current veteran players thankful that their careers are coming to an end very soon? Well, to find all of that out and how Vic even became this elite in the first place, click the video on your screen right now.